So this is all the important information. And now I'm looking forward to the keynote of the day, and that's Transmedia Architecture, Rekonstructing Mariënbad and Other Projects. That's the title of our first keynote. And once again, please feel free to ask all your questions. Just post them and I pass them on. I'm looking forward to the speaker Mats Dekock. He is from Brussels. He is an artist at WERKTANK, that's a production platform for new and old media arts. He's also an architect who has gathered experience on construction sites and implements them in transmedial structures. And he was also at the Transmedia School in Brussels. So welcome, Mats Dekock.
Good morning. I was asked to do this lecture in English. It's no problem at all. If you have any questions afterwards, you can also ask them in German. I'm ready to answer them as well. So what I would like to tell you today is a research project I've been doing where I, as an architect, am trying or feeling the need to transform the architectural environment of films into installations that use the architectural toolbox, the methods and the techniques that I have developed as an architect to create transmedia installations. So to engage a dialogue between that what I know as an architect, the toolbox of the architectural representation, to re-establish, reconstruct the architectural environment of film. I have done so by using one of the greatest constructs in film, L'année dernière à Mariënbad, a masterpiece of Alain Resnais, in which Resnais constructs a mental environment for film. The rooms, the movie is entirely shot in a Baroque palace, and the inner rooms of the palace don't really feel as if they are real. They feel like they are a construct. They feel like the mental environment of the architectural environment, of the architectural spaces, is what carries the movie, more than the narrative, and way more than the rooms, and way more than the subjects that play, the Schauspieler. So basically what I've tried to do is all of these inner rooms of the chateau, reconstruct them in a way where you, as a person, stand in the middle of the room and have this one-point perspective, the vanishing point of the architectural experience. And in the way, if you use all of these vanishing points, one-point perspectives, and you place all of these experienced rooms, one after another, they form this circular experience where you end up where you started. The finish will become the starting point. So what I've tried to do here is engage in this play, obviously, in a 3D model, where the architectural space and the mental space, reconstructed space, engage in a dialogue. So here you see all of these spaces that for me, they were always empty. So architecture is at the center point of the experience of the movie. All of these empty corridors, all of these vanishing points in the perspective, all of these things that make up the experience of the movie, the narrative that is connected through the pathways of the interior. That's what I've done. I've traced them. Here you can see the vanishing points of the perspective, where you feel that the depth of the space makes the depth of the narrative. And then you translate it the way you do as an architect. An architect uses their drawing tools, but also 3D modeling tools. And then you see where the standpoint or the point of view that a viewer has towards these spaces, at the vanishing point of perspective. All of these different rooms, one after another, laid out on a circle, combined into this loop of experiences. That's what I've tried to do with this installation. The 3D model, doing the same thing, where one room after the other combines the experiences. You can also see that some of the rooms repeat. One comes in another form, as is done in the movie. One experience doesn't necessarily follow the same linear experiences as do the other constructions. That's what I've tried to do. Also here, an architectural tool, the drawing to try and interpret the space you see. Keep on drawing and keep on tracing the traces that are left behind by the film. This gives us a 3D model that I've obviously 3D cut, 3D printed, used all of these technical toolbox methods to try and reconstruct Mariënbad, or the way that it feels, in which all of these hallways come back onto itself, once in one compilation, once in another compilation. And the composition of these things, they vary. They are different in every single way. So they come back and they go away, as they do in the movie. Sometimes you go back to the same place, and then you go away from the same place, in order to find yourself in a loophole of repeated experiences. That's what I've tried to embed within this installation as well. And that's what you can see that I've tried to do. A central element in the experience of l'année derrière à Mariënbad is a central hallway, the central corridor, connecting all of these different spaces we have seen before. The central corridor is a place where the narrative always comes back to. So what I've tried to do is reconstruct this hallway. But the idea is, what is this hallway basically? Is it a place that is standing still and connecting all of these different parts? And thus, is it the framework for the architectural experiences of the movie? Or is it a dynamic thing in which all of these different doors connecting to the hallway give meaning to all of these different experiences that goes on behind these doors? So playing with this idea of a dynamic element and a static element where this central backbone of experiences was wrapped, and where this dynamic experience of the feeling of the movement of narrative through space was reinforced. So I traced this central hallway, again as I did before, using an architectural toolbox, again using this single point, vanishing point experiences, where the depth of the experiences is mapped in 3 dimensions. And I've repeated them, because in a frequency of a movie, as you know, the frequency how a movie is constructed, comes back into the method in which this installation works. The central vanishing point, the repetition of the experience, the multitude of hallways combined together, rotated and illuminated in a frequency that corresponds to the speed of movement, which makes this illusion of a static experiences while being this dynamic of connection of the movement, of the frequency of the light. These obviously are the construction drawings for the 3D model that I've 3D printed in one piece that creates this, one sculpture element illuminated with frequency of light. These construction drawings also show this, or they enhance this experience of one-point vanishing perspective, in which you question yourself, is this a static experience? Is this a dynamic experience? That was the second part of my installation. There's a third body. There's a third part to the installation. There are voices as well. Obviously, there are humans present in the movie. And the humans' voices are heard from a distance, and sometimes they come close. And sometimes you can experience what they say. You can understand what they are saying. Sometimes they vanish into a distance. So I tried to reconstruct this concept by working on the geometry of text, in which the geometry of text is torn apart in horizontal and vertical elements that are flickered in the frequency of experience to become readable in certain instances, when the frequency of movement corresponds to the frequency of illumination, you can experience text that is readable. So the introductory text, the silent paths, the endless mazed walls, where I remember the silent rooms, which is a translation of the opening sequence, is wrapped in horizontal and vertical geometrical shapes that are mapped once again onto a disk. Why onto a disk? Because of the rotation of the movement, to reestablish this notion of frequency, to reestablish this notion of experience through movement. And I took them apart, where in some parts, you can see on the third line, the endless mazed walls is readable on a certain frequency, whereas on another frequency, only the abstracts of horizontal and vertical elements will be experienced. If you do so, and you repeat that over a multitude of frequencies and a multitude of speed, then you can become readable. And it becomes readable, and it becomes an understandable dynamic. And it becomes a perceivable dynamic, where the ornaments will become in focus, and where the ornaments will become understandable as they were within the opening sequence of the movie, basically. So what we have done here is mapping very different elements, where the abstracts of geometrical shapes and the abstracts of geometrical compositions are merged together under the frequency of different illumination, and therefore become focused, readable, and understandable. This is what a construct would be, where the silent paths, the endless mazed walls, where I remember the silent rooms and footsteps absorbed, ornaments, bygone era, they walk once again with small steps through one corridor that follows another. Whispering corridors, oversized staircases, black mirrors, rows of doorways, windowless galleries, trompe-l'œil architecture in this sprawling hotel, picking my way randomly through a maze of identical paths that are once again all deserted. That basically is the opening sequence to L'année dernière à Mariënbad. And this opening sequence is the basic subliminal focus of what was my research project. So my research project was basically the embodiment of that, what you can read right there, where I've tried to use a single point perspective, where I tried to use a connecting corridor, where I've tried to use frequency and movement to reconstruct Mariënbad. So I see that is basically what I have created. The installation can be seen here in this area. I will show you later. So what I will do now, because I see that I still have some minutes again, is re-show you the movie. So go back to the movie and wrap up what I've told you. The installation consists of 3 pieces. There are 3 pieces in which the first one, which you will see, is a reconstruction of the several interior spaces, the several rooms that are juxtaposed one after the other, in which one after the other room is a reconstruction through a single point perspective with a vanishing point of an empty space, of an empty corridor, of an empty hallway that comes back sometimes in greater detail, sometimes in more overview, but always as the framework for the architectural experience of the movie. So that's what I've tried to do. Basically, this is a model of a dimension 1.50 meters, rotating, where there's a door spy installed, which you can see right here. Through the door spy, you can experience this forced perspective as you would look through an empty corridor, as if you were questioned as your position of the spectator to the hallway, as if the notion of scale, the notion of size is removed through the morph of the door lens, the door spy. That was the first installation that got me to work on the notions of Mariënbad. These are the corridors that are traced. Tracing is a very important part in my work. Using the architectural toolbox to reposition the perspective as an architect, to reposition yourself. Are you a spectator to the movie, or are you a part of the movie? How do you embody the movie? How do you make representations of the movie? How do you visualize the experience? This is architecture at work to try and trace an architectural filmic experience. And these are the production drawings that I use to 3D cut the installation. The second part was the central hallway. The central hallway that connects all of these experiences. All of these experiences, dynamic, static. Have you seen them before? Are they in focus? Are they out of focus? Is it an element in which it is moving? Is it an element that is static? Where do you stand as a person looking at it? Obviously, what you can also see is it obviously is a 3D structure, and the 3D structure is moving, which means it's perfectly geometrically correct as a 3D printing element. But since I've done it as a human, I've made some errors. You can see the flickering. Some things aren't perfectly assembled. Some things are off. And the way that it is off makes it questioned as, is it standing still or is it moving? Is it a dynamic or is it a static experience? This duality between the human point and the computer point is also an element of value in this work. Once again, the human perspective, the vanishing point, the tracing, the architectural toolbox, the architectural methods, and then once again, where we end up at the geometrical or the most abstract reconstruction of human presence within the filmic experience. The text is reduced to geometrical shapes, to geometrical forms, in which the combination of horizontal and vertical elements is that what combines into readable and experienceable spaces. Combine horizontals and verticals. And maybe if you do an effort here, because it's very hard to film something that flickers, but the experienced or perceived words will become focused. If you do your best, you can see the silent parts in the first two lines. I think that is the most readable thing in this film. But it works way better live, so I would invite you all to go and see it for yourself. But this obviously is a reinterpretation or a reconstruction of something that was abstract into something that is physical. The silent parts that are combined, the horizontal and the vertical. If you map them onto a circle, once again, to enhance the dynamic of movement, frequency, into an experienceable, an experience that you can sense, a sensory experience. The silent parts are becoming focused. The small step are focused. So if you get them all into one singular experience, that is what combines into this installation. And that is what I wanted to explain to you. Thank you.
Yeah, so Mats, thank you so much. Of course, it is still time for the Q&A. So I'm already looking into our audience. Gibt es Fragen? Wir können ja jetzt auf Deutsch wechseln. Du verstehst ja und du sprichst ja auch.
Well, you understand German and you speak German really well, so we just change language. Are there any questions in the audience? Anything you would like to know?
Erstmal nicht, also meldet euch gerne einfach.
Well, just raise your hand when there are.
Entschuldigung, ich
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
Moment, warte, da kommt das Mikrofon.
The microphone is on its way.
Thanks very much, Mats, for this really magical work. It's in a way analytic and illusionary work. But a very general question: why Mariënbad? So, what is what really links you to this film? That's my first question, and also it's more kind of a remark, but maybe you have a similar kind of attitude to your work. Is this work also connected to these early optical toys, to the pre-cinema, to the zooscopes, and all these things between vaudeville and cinema? So, and also the link to the rotoreliefs, for example, Marcel Duchamp. That was when I saw the work for the first time. It has been proposed by the colleagues of the Weissenhof Gallery. I hope they are also here in the audience. But why Mariënbad?
It's very interesting that you combine these two questions, because for me they are connected in the way that Mariënbad, I've seen the movie in the beginning. I've seen it, I think, 10 times in a period of 2 months, because there was some professor of mine back in the days when I was studying who asked us to watch it. And I didn't believe the movie in the beginning. I thought it was a very amateuristic movie. That was the first time I saw it. It was a very amateuristic movie. Why an amateuristic movie? Because I didn't believe the actors playing in the part. It was like actors playing a part of actors playing a part. So there was this duality or this layeredness of experience that I had. And after watching it a multitude of times, I started understanding what I think, because it's always an interpretation, René meant with this film, is that it's a construct. The film is a construct of a movie. It's not a film, it's a construct. Construct in which actors are positioned towards one another, where it's never completely clear what their role is, it's never completely clear what the narrative is, but it's always clear that there's a juxtaposition between the actors and space. So it's a constant construct of what are these people doing in this room now, and then we go back to this room, and then we go back to that room, and the size of the place is important to the size of the experience or the meaning of the scene within the film. So it felt like a construct, and it worked its way through to me that architecture in this point was more mental or more the carrier of the sensory experience in the movie than it was for the narrative. It was not the decor for the narrative. It was basically the element of the filmic experience. So what drew me to that film was this notion that the architecture is the carrier of the experience. And the actors playing actors that are playing actors was something that was so inspiring, because by being so open about it, it allowed you to analyze the movie. Not just experience, but analyze it. And that's a good thing, because once you referenced to the early cinematic products or the early cinematic experiences, they are also very open and clear and easy to read how they work. And if you know how they work, it is so inspiring and more triggering to engage in or to look at them and to experience them to the fullest. Whereas in digital times, it's just about the essence of the image. But in a physical thing, it draws you to the constructive elements of how these scenes are produced, how these images are produced. That opens up another dimension, which was the same thing for René, not just the way the actors act and the images that are shown, but also how is it constructed. That opens up another dimension. And that's what drew me to that movie.
Well, it's really, really interesting to see what kind of, what got you thinking, what inspired you, like that. One more really important thing we have to mention is that we can also see it in the exhibition space.
It's the Reithalle?
It's the Foyer neben der kleinen Bühne.
Ja.
Wir können jetzt auch auf Deutsch weitermachen.
Next to the small stage. We can also continue in German.
Also da erzähl vielleicht noch mal ganz kurz, was
Maybe you can tell us what we can see in the exhibition.
Installationen sind drei separate Installationen.
Well, there are 3 separate installations, as you have seen, and the 3 parts are set up in small and very dark or private areas. So you can only see it with maximum 2 or 3 people at the same time, so that you can really experience it.
kein Problem, glaube ich. Also das können Sie jetzt
I think that's not a problem.
auf jeden Fall entdecken.
Well, during the coffee break, you can go and discover that. And what is also important, tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we can see you again. So what's up? That's a good question.
Talk, oder?
There is a talk, isn't there?
Ich weiß nicht, wo der Inhalt werden soll. Also das weiß ich noch nicht.
Also
I don't really know about the content yet. It's the artist talk on Saturday at 2 p.m. So just save the date.
herzlichen Dank, dass du hier warst.
Mats, thank you for being here and that you gave us an insight into your works. Thank you.